All right, Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to the Great Rally book study. I'm really looking forward to tonight because, we in the last 4 months we covered a lot of history. We looked at deep into the forwards. We spent a lot of time in those areas. Everything you can imagine about alcoholism, from doctor's opinion, Bill's story to solution, more of alcoholism, and I think we know the difference between a alcoholic and a moderate and hard drinker and all that, and the insanity of the first drink, and the strange mental blank spots, and restless, irritable, and discontent, and allergy obsession. We know why. So tonight we're going to begin the spiritual journey, the spiritual journey into the spiritual solution. I'm going to read a quote from Time magazine, and this was a number of years ago, but I really like what it said, and I believe this was when they named AA one of the you know most important organizations. So it was quite a while ago back. Um, it says the greatest minds in the world, from universalists, I'm sorry, from universities to the medical field to government welfare groups, and even science, has spent millions of dollars in an attempt to find the cause of alcoholism. Yet no one has been able to place their finger upon the exact cause. However, has become a conscious opinion among these great minds that have attacked the problem for so many years that a lack of proper spiritual application on the part of the victim is at least the primary cause. So the solution must be proper spiritual application to overcome it, something AA has said for over 70 years. I mean, so well said. Um, I want to go to page 45, second paragraph. And it says, where it says its main object. It's the second sentence, I believe. Second paragraph. Its main object, this is talking about this book, is enable you to find a power greater in yourself, which will solve your problem. For some reason, people interpret that. They don't say it verbally, but they interpret in their mind that the main object of this book is enable you to find a power greater in yourself so you can solve your problem. That's not what they're talking about here. You know, they seek out God so they can solve their problem. That's what they think. If we were just seeking out God so we can go solve it, it would be a self-help organization or self-help group. It's a simple wording, which will solve our problem, which is God, power greater than yourself, what do you want to call it, that make our program spiritual in nature, not self-help. It's a spiritual solution so we can find the power that we desperately lack. You know, um, not just a few weeks back, I spoke at a pretty large meeting in person, and I wanted to say something controversial to get their attention right off bat. Nothing, you know, nothing bad, malicious, but you know, something to just get their attention. You know, and I said what I said is the first thing in my mouth after I said Steve would recover alcoholics said this is not a program of not drinking. And the people in the room's eyes, one guy had 40 years, his eyes looked rolled his eyes back, and I said it's a program of finding God. And the half the room just stared at me. Why did they stare though? It's because the main focus of Alcoholics Anonymous and these other organizations, you know, CA and all these ones, is it's its focus is not drinking or not using. We celebrate time away from drink, and that's deemed success, even if they're miserable. A success isn't looked at someone who's done their fifth step or found God. It's time away from drink. I mean, if time meant something in this program, then we want to hear some of the insane things some of the people who got 30 years say. This program is not about a drinking problem, it's a spiritual problem. We lack the power to overcome our drinking. The seeking of that power to overcome alcoholism makes this a spiritual program. So over the course of the next month in here, we got a lot of fun. For the next few months, we got a lot of fun. But over the course of next month, we're going to show talk a whole lot about God and why God is the nucleus of this program. A complete shift, God of your understanding. Like it's a complete shift from the symptom to the solution and union with God from here on out. That's all it's about. So with that being said, I mean, what is the core message of life? I mean, we could think so many things, but it is the core message of life for me today is that there's an absolute truth that's beyond all my concepts and all my beliefs. And the condition is simple. I got to seek it. I mean, what we must discover that true nature. And that true nature is whole, which is sane, limitless, and everlasting. How do we get there? I mean, Carl Jung called it spiritual conversion, which is the adoption of a new belief system towards higher power or God, whatever you want to call it, that differs from the old belief system, right? And that leads to a change of character and wholeness, not a psychic change, but an entire psychic change. Not just a psychic change, but an entire one, complete psychic change. And Silkworth said, after describing, the cycle of drinking, which is men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. He talks about that cycle of drinking. He says that cycle is repeated over and over again. Unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope, I'm sorry, of their recovery. He's saying the real alcoholic must have a complete change, psychic change to recover. Complete psychic change is not easily achieved because it means radical changes to our thinking and belief systems. Now, here's the thing. People come in here bleeding and dying and suicidal and everything else. And the minute they wipe off their wounds, they forget that they need to have a radical change, you know. But it's radical change in our belief system, a belief system that we've had all along, our entire life. That's centered on fear and guilt and self-esteem, low self-esteem, pride. But when these radical changes occur to our thinking, when those radical changes occur, our thinking changes. And when our thinkings change, our beliefs change. And when our beliefs change, our desires change. And when our desires change, what happens? Our desire to drink disappears. So radical change in thinking and beliefs shifts our desires, meaning the obsessions removed and gone. The only avenue that can produce this complete psychic change I know is the 12 steps. The complete psychic change is beautifully described on page 27 by Carl Jung. I say written by Carl Jung, interpreted by Bill Wilson, right? On page 27. So it says, middle of the page, they appear. So we see it, right? They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements. Displacement means to rid of, and rearrangements means redone. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, thrown out. And a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. So what's a conception? It's a new set of ideas, new set of intentions begin to dominate them. What he is saying to us is this, basically, if you look at this sorts of steps, the steps are not about gaining anything, they're about losing something. So how does an entire psychic change occur? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we maintain it and grow in 10, 11, 12. We can always recreate over and over again what we've been doing. Continuous nurturing of the psychic change the rest of our lives. I love when Carl Jung said alcoholics' craving for alcohol was the equivalent of spiritual thirst for wholeness, also known as union with God. Pretty deep. And with Jung, it's studying alcoholics. He discovered that there was a thirst for a sense of wholeness that led alcoholics to drink. But the wholeness, that came from intoxication was a false wholeness, and a power that you know that dissolves when one dries out, causing the alcoholic to be discouraged with life, and even more leading them to seek more alcohol. Alcohol becomes a solution. Now, millions of people every day do that, some without even consciously knowing it. And without consequences, they're not alcoholics. We can't because of the allergy obsession, meaning the solution, our alcohol solution works against us. That's why Jung believed that a radical conversion experience was absolutely necessary for recovery. And of course, we know that A developed their spiritual path to do that, 12 steps. Another quote by Jung was, I'm going to paraphrase this, but show me a drunk and I'll show someone in search for God. Pretty interesting there. So we're going to go to the spiritual appendix, and I hope I say the right one here, page 569. I think that's the 4th edition. No, Rob will get it right. I always look at I'm a 3rd edition person, so I'm always stuck there. So until you find the spiritual appendix, I'll give you a background of the spiritual appendix. So in 1941, they did a second printing of the 1st edition. And the wording of step 12 was changed from having had a spiritual experience to spiritual awakening. And the reason it was simple was because members thought that they were like almost let down. They weren't having these spectacular upheavals like Bill Wilson described, right? And they also added, and so they looked into William James' book, Variety of Lived Experiences, for these, slower, more gradual awakenings that he described, and he saw those happening. Thank God for that book. But the spiritual appendix was added here to show us a difference, which we're going to look at tonight, between awakening experience. And so I hope everyone's there. So the terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book. Upon careful reading, shows that personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested in itself in many different forms. So what's personality? Personality is a combination of ideas, beliefs, and feelings and emotions. I throw attitudes in there too. And what does that do? That performs our mental behavior, otherwise known as our identity. It's kind of like this. It's like what's inside of us. You squeeze an orange. Does apple juice come out? No, orange juice comes out. If you squeeze someone who's angry, what comes out? Anger, right? So what they're saying here is, we receive change in beliefs and feelings and attitudes. And let's see how it says, yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes, religious experiences, must be the nature of sudden spectacular upheavals. Happily, for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous, which means untrue. It's not true. And the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes were described. We had Bill, Carl Jung, Silkworth described them, a few other people. But though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in outlook. So God consciousness is the awareness of higher self, the awareness of it. And or call God, whatever you want to call it. But it's the part of our being, I don't want to say human being, but part of our being that's capable of exceeding our human animal instincts, exceeding them. I'm only going to follow one thing or another, either these instincts or I'm going to follow the message I get from inside of me from the spirit. Spiritual experience, so it's a sudden revolutionary change, immediate overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. So it's a sudden, overpowering shift into this God consciousness as a direct result of contact experience with God. As a result, as a direct experience with God. How do we know something in life? From experiencing it. Anything else is a theory. We only know what we've experienced, right? If I if you know, I never met Rob, but I have a theory that he's 5'3", but I meet him, he's 7'1". Well, I would experience it and I would know he's 7'1" all of a sudden. But this leads to knowing God, leading to change in character and wholeness, sanity. Because among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of these experiences are what psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. So spiritual awakening, gradual. Educational variety develops slowly over a period of time, leading to personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. So spiritual awakening, gradual shift into this consciousness, not boom, boom. And that leads us to a new dimension of reality, which has been previously unknown, leading to change of character and wholeness, sanity, right? So here's the result of the spiritual awakening. And I love this. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. I remember I had friends giving a friend a ride somewhere one time, and he did something wrong, and he's just like, I'm sorry, and I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. He's like, you changed, and the whole personality he was showing me made me realize I wasn't the same person. Another example was when I went and made amends and people weren't afraid of me anymore. It made me realize that something had changed. Those people were aware even before me. He finally realizes he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. Look at that says, reaction to life. That's deep. That such a change could hardly have ever been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom be accomplished by years of self-discipline. Years. Some of these, I'm not knocking religions or anything like that, but it takes years for some people to have the changes they need. And a few months is being very low in there, because I think spiritual awakenings happen even sooner than that. He's not talking about how long we take to do the steps there, a few months. He's talking about the awakening. With few exceptions, our members have found they have tapped into an unsuspected, and underlying this, inner resource. It's God within us, deep down within us, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Thank God we have that. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. So I'm going to put up this chart up here. This just gives you an idea of what we're looking at a deeper level. So, you got desperation, hopelessness, terror, surrender, result, spiritual experience, sudden revolutionary change, consciousness, followed by a vast change in outlook. Spiritual awakening, they still got to do the steps, right? Even have it before or during. Willingness, believe, decision, action, result, spiritual awakening. Vast change in feeling and outlook develops slowly over a period of time. Look at the results. Personality change is sufficient to bring out recovery. We all land in the same place. So regardless of what type of psychic change you have, your perception and reactions to life are vital to our ability to not only achieve, but also grow and maintain our sobriety. It's pretty deep. Pretty deep. But it shows you right there, we land in the same place. It says most emphatically. So most emphatic, that means with highest importance, utmost importance. Most emphatically, we just say that any alcoholic. Now, he didn't say some, he says any. Who does that leave out? None of us. So that gets your attention, doesn't it? Capable of honestly facing his problems and the life or experience can recovery. Now he's got our attention again. Capable of honestly facing his problems and life or experience can recover. So, like, Fred said it was only a matter, Fred said a matter of which could solve all my problems. He does not say here problem. It says problems, live experience, honestly facing his problems, meaning they're not just talking about drug problems or alcohol problems. Hold on one second. I gotta tell my kid to be quiet real quick. Sorry about that. My kid's hammering something up in his room. So they're not talking about our alcohol and drug problem. They might be talking about a resentment problem. We don't have resentment, though. We have resentments. We don't have fear. We have fears. It's not just, facing all our problems. At meetings, we really talk about those other problems, do we? We talk about the alcohol problem. We don't talk about the problem of anger, our fear problem, our resentment problem. Rarely do you hear that. I think if people talked about that stuff more, it would put people more into the solution, and we hear less people say, I go to anger management or I go to the therapist. Nothing wrong with those places, but think about it. They don't talk about their God problem. The big question is, can you honestly face those problems? Can you? I can face your problems, right? I can face my family's problems. I can face all these problems in here. I can tell them what's wrong with them. I could not honestly face my problems. Are you ready to honestly face your problems? All of them. But the condition is honestly face them. They're talking about self-honesty here. The best definition of honesty I've ever heard, and to quote my good friend Derek Fulton, who just, we all love, the awareness of where I'm at. Honesty is the awareness of where I'm at. Do I have resentments? Do I have fears? Do I have a God problem? Am I selfish? Do I have pride? Am I dishonest? All the stuff we've ran from. Do I need to make amends to that person? Do I need to do these steps? So they just told me here, if I'm honest with myself, I can recover. It doesn't say recovering either. It says recover, which means restore to health. The first promise in this book is a title page, a story of how many thousand men and women have recovered from alcoholism, not recovering. Yet people attend Alcoholic Anonymous meetings, a fellowship which took the name from this book we're going over, not the other way around, say you cannot recover. They say we're recovering. One guy told me I'll be recovered when I'm dead. Told me flat out. Some say that for years. Recovering is a state I'm in during a course of action of healing to restore me to health. I'll give you an example. I've had 5 back surgeries. The big one was a double fusion. Now, when I woke up the next day, physical therapist came in there and he said, it's time for you to get up and move. I was like, what? And I had to get up and move and start my recovering from surgery. It was painful. And went on for almost 3 weeks in the hospital for 17 days recovering, getting up and moving around. When I was recovered from the surgery, I didn't want to be recovering anymore. Recovering is in the big book twice. Recover is in the big book 17 times. Recover is in 24 times. They both mean restored to health. So if I'm not honest with my problems, I can recover. But what if I'm not honest? Go to page 58. Let's see what happens. Page 58 says, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are conscious and capable of being honest with themselves. He just told us that. If I'm honest, I can recover. Simple. Let's go back to where we're at. So any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in life or experience can recover. Here's another condition. Provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. Underline the all. The alls are very important in this book. If you want to talk about the must, what about the alls? There's tons of alls in this book. It's very important. A closed mind cannot get fed. Meaning if your mind is closed, you're not letting anything in. Open-minded is to consider someone else's opinion other than only your own. This is an open-minded program. So he's saying here, be open-minded to all spiritual concepts. A good example of spiritual concepts are what? The steps. What if I'm not open-minded to forgive or being honest or discussing my, fifth step with, doing my fifth step? What if I'm not open-minded to making amends or being altruistic? They're saying here is, don't be a hater of spiritual ideas because the steps are spiritual ideas. Don't be a hater also of religion or another's religion. Don't trip over someone's ladder because you believe your ladder is the only way. Your ladder to God isn't the only ladder to God. That's why I love this program. There's many roads to the top of the mountain. Doug could fly to the top of the mountain in an airplane. Kickin could hike. Rob could climb it. Howard could drive a motorcycle to the top. All these different ways to the top of the mountain. But guess what? When we all reach the top, we all have the same view. That's just like this. If you have one concept of religion, if you're closed-minded against other concepts, the steps will be very difficult. They're simply saying, just be open-minded. I will tell you this, when you're open-minded, when your mind is open to all spiritual concepts, it's absolutely electric. Like Fred said, became open-minded, quite as important was the discovery that these spiritual principles could solve all my problems, See, also says here, you can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. Intolerance is unwillingness to recognize and respect the differences of, opinions and beliefs. And belligerent denial is angry refuse to accept something as truth. Ask yourself, do you have intolerance? Do you have belligerent denial? Towards anything, ask yourself. In your nightly meditation tonight, ask yourself that question. This, not yesterday, not last month, right now, at that moment. Look what he says. We find no one have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. I love when people in meetings say, I'm getting ready to do the spirituality part of the program. Well, what steps aren't spiritual? There's no spiritual part of the program. They're all spiritual. Probably the most spiritual step is step one. You're admitting you're broken and powerless. How spiritual is that? Think about that. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are essentials of recovery. But these are indispensable. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are conditions for recovery. What do they mean? Willingness is to be ready. I used to get so angry when people didn't do their fourth step with me, and my friends would tell me they're just not ready yet. So willingness means to be ready to do something, and is only demonstrated by action. Honesty, the awareness of where I'm at. Self-honesty. Am I powerless over alcohol, or can I control it? Is my life consumed by resentment, or others to blame? Does, I mentioned some of fear. So does fear drive my life, just taking away from my decisions? Can I run my life on my own? How about like a self-honesty question? Who am I? What am I? Why am I here? All those questions. How about, am I willing to let go of my old self? Am I willing to accept new terms to live by? Or how shall I now live my life? That's what my sponsor asked me. When I did 6 and 7, I had an awakening. It was, how shall you now live your life from now on? And guess what? I had an answer. Because he asked me that question at the beginning. How do you want to live your life? And I said, I don't know. And after the awakening, I had an answer, right? Open mind is to consider someone else's pain other than your own. I mentioned that. Can you do that? Keep your mind open and let the process take you. Essentially means necessary. So what are you saying here? Let's put it in different terms slightly, but the right words is being ready, knowing where I'm at, and to consider someone else's pain other than my own are absolutely necessary to be restored to health. That's a different way to look at it. So now let's look at this bottom part that's often skipped sometimes. There is a principle which is bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and cannot fail to keep a man, people, I'm going to say, in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. Herbert Spencer was saying, people will write something off as not working without ever trying it. These steps, meditation is not for me. Have you tried it? No. I can't make amends. Have you tried it? They call making it's called making a decision based on theory rather than fact. You can argue theories, you can't argue facts. We love condemning things that we know nothing about. We love theories. It's just a theory is just a set of accepted beliefs that we do not know. We're going to argue something even though we never experienced it. That's what a theory is. I said anything in life I know is from direct experience. Everything else is a theory. It comes from a Greek word meaning speculation. And how many decisions have you made based on theory? Drawing conclusions based on theory, condemning something even though you've not experienced it. Contempt prior to investigation. Did you ever do that with God? So before we get into we agnostics, probably won't get there tonight because it's going pretty fast. It's important to know what the words like agnostic and atheist mean. Also words like theist and gnostic. To go over these four types of understanding, we're gonna use something called the faith index. I'm gonna put up on the screen in a minute. And a question what's more important? I always tell people this: belief or knowledge? We're gonna find out, right? So I'm gonna put up the faith index. So you see them all in here: atheist, theist, agnostic. I'm gonna go through each one. So the first one we're gonna look at is the atheist, right? Atheist, you take away the A, it means theist. We'll get to that one soon. But the A is a prefix for the word not. So an atheist is one who rejects religious or spiritual ideas and denies the existence of God. They don't, so I don't say they believe, that God doesn't exist. No, they reject it. We want beliefs. But they try to prove God doesn't exist. An atheist does not have an affirmative belief that there is no God. They simply reject it. So it's a mental conviction without proof. Mental conviction without proof. So on the chart, you'll see the atheist, he doesn't believe, we know that. So they do not make a decision. They do not take action. They get no results. But what if they do can they make a decision to do 4 through 9? Absolutely. Of course. And, can they have a complete transformation the steps offer? Absolutely. Meaning they can have an experience with the steps. The gray area is I meet people all the time, they say I'm atheist. And they've done the steps in their book thumpers and stuff, and I've never met one I consider an atheist. While they don't use the word God, they talk about the same peace I have. They talk about the same love that I have. They just don't call it God. Remember, most people looking for God never call it God. Anyone who does 4 to 9 is going to have some type of experience. I put the question marks up there. Never write off something like that. We're not in a tug of war to make someone believe. Step two is not about believing. It's a promise. We'll get to that soon. But look at the next one is the theist, the believer. I thought believement was everything. It means to have trust and confidence that the existence of God is true or real. So this person only believes, and that's good enough for them for where they're at. And so they see no reason to take action, and they don't get all this stuff here. No results. Take no action. No growth, no knowledge. A belief is no matter how sincere, if not followed by action, is nothing. You don't need proof to believe in anything. And the one thing that's important about beliefs to know is every belief you've ever had has been handed to you. Right? You say that water's hot, so you don't touch it, but if you do touch it and burn yourself, now you know. Different. We're gonna get to that. But they're handed to you. Someone else told you about it. This is how you do it. You're good, you're bad, you're right, you're wrong. It's believing is very similar to theory, and we hid behind them both the same amount of time. They've not experienced God. It falls into the category of not knowing. If a believer were to honestly define their relationship with God, they would call it deep admiration. They love God. They know about God. They just don't know God. I used to go to this one church down the street, and there would be 7,000 people there. And I would think, how many people here are just believers? Well, most of them. And they don't need to go beyond that. But a belief, no matter how sincere, if not followed by action, is not enough. No change. It's the same thing as the atheist, a mental conviction without proof. Here's the question. Is a belief in God sufficient enough for long-term recovery? No way. Is a belief in God sufficient to begin your journey? Absolutely. But saying you believe God is true or real, it might give you a psychic change, but not an entire psychic change. Not every fathom of your being. There's a good analogy I heard years ago is in Lake Fort, Texas, they have the biggest, largemouth bass. It's like 20, 8 pounds, 20, 30 inches long, whatever, monster bass. And they're huge, nothing like it in the world. Now I can tell you, you can take my word for it and believe that this fish is based on my testimony. And I can tell you all the people who fished, and they can hear their testimonies. You can go tell your friends, oh, that Steve catches the biggest fish in the world. That's your belief. Or you can, hop in my car and go out to Texas and let's catch one and experience it and know that it does exist. Do you want to believe or no? Now we get to the agnostic. A also means prefix for not. So agnostics is, a lot of question marks there, right? They're unsure of the existence of God. Most of us walked in here like this. A good place to be, actually. An agnostic is unsure of the existence of God based on unsatisfactory and insufficient proof. But they don't deny that God might exist. They just want proof. They want to, they don't believe or disbelieve. They're just not sure, skeptical, doubtful about this existence. They're not going to confirm or deny it exists. They're probably going to argue about it. They don't even want to bring it up because they're playing tug of war themselves. To them, it's just that God is unknown. Uncertain claims from what? Lack of knowledge. Uncertain claims because they've not experienced. Falls in the category of not knowing. I think most of us, like I said, walked in here this way. So you see the chart is no action, no results. But if you take the action, and you believe that you're willing to believe something can happen and you do the steps, it will. Right? just like the two others, it's a mental convictions outside of proof. I love the story of the agnostic goldfish. The agnostic goldfish is Rob Goldfish and Steve Goldfish are swimming in the water, and we come across Summer Goldfish, and we're out there flipping around, and Rob says, "Hey, Summer," and she says, "Ain't the water gorgeous today?" And she just swims on, and then Rob looks to me and he goes, "Dude," he goes, "I know what to do. Let's go find the water." We're like people. I always say that I was like a fish looking for water my whole life, not knowing I was in it. At the end, there's no real difference between the atheist, the believer, and the agnostic. Now, some people will go, "You can't call an atheist and a believer." No, it's the same. They're not knowing that we need. They're all mental conditions outside proof. But let's talk about this last one here, Gnostic. That's good to go beyond beliefs, way beyond beliefs, and gain a spiritual understanding of knowing God as a result of what? That spiritual conversion I mentioned earlier, the spiritually awakened, spiritual experience, whatever it is. They know God exists because they've experienced God. How do you know something? From experiencing it. So like 5 times today. Well, here's the greatest thing about it. When that light is on, only you can turn it off. And it's always been there. So this person believes, maybe they don't believe, but they're going to make a decision, take action, spiritual conversion, spiritual progress, and knows God. Now, all these basically lead to this. All of them do. The big question is, how do you go beyond belief and spiritual experience to know God? The steps. Do you see why I said earlier there's a fundamental difference between knowing about God and knowing God? I knew only about God my whole life. When I went to Catholic school from, well, baptized as a baby in Catholic school and did everything under the sun. I thought I knew everything about God, but I never knew God. Knowing God is to experience God and then engaging in a personal relationship. So with the belief, there's always what? Doubt. Because it was handed to you. Something you got it yourself, you worked for it, you experienced it, no one handed it to you. Knowing there is no doubt. Also, you cannot believe and know at the same time. People go, "What does that mean?" You can't believe and know at the same time because you can only believe in what you don't know. And because once you know, it's beyond belief, it's knowing. You can believe, something may not be true. Well, when you believe, it's right. When you believe something, that something may not be true, but you cannot know something that may not be true. And once you know it's true. A belief, you're always kind of, because you experience, it. Basically, when you know something, there's no gray area. There's no red tape. Here's a perfect example. I believe this is water. Now I know this is water. So I see a glass of water, I look at it, I believe it's water. I taste it, I know it's water. It's not vodka. Hope not, no. You see that there? In fact, a believer who never takes action thinks they know, but when they take action, they say what? How blind I've been. They say how blind I've been. Here's the thing with knowing, and it can never let you down in times of crisis. Your beliefs will let you down because there's doubt involved. We get caught up in reading and hearing about God from others. We listen to testimonies, at churches and every place, everywhere. Testimonies of another person about God. Again, do you want to know about God or do you want to know God? Because you're not going to find God in a testimony of another person. You're not going to know God. Yeah, as you can see on on that chart, knowing isn't something you do at night or when no one's looking. It's a 24-hour commitment that it's going to interfere with your life, maybe your pleasures, but it requires involvement, action, participation, commitment. Action, participation, commitment. It's not something you do or don't do. I had a sponsor one time asking, when are we taking some, is there any days off in this? I laughed. He looked at me even more mad. But it's more about reading about it. It's acting, it's not, or acting spiritual. It's a way of life. It's who you are. So knowing God is a spiritual life. Because we plug into God, we plug into the source of life. So we receive what this book talks about it: strength, inspiration, guidance, direction. So when we know to know me more, to know me more God, to know me more God, to know me more God, and to know me more God, the more we know hope, love, peace, happiness, freedom. Way different than knowing about God. I know God not because I know about God. I know God because I experienced it, and I wouldn't be able to get there without the steps. And just like I know, you know, not because, just like I know Rob, not because I know about Rob. I know about Rob because I've experienced him, sat down and talked to him quite a bit. And how do you get to know God? You spend some time with God. I remember I went to heard Wayne Dyer speak live, and it was an amazing night. And he went into the whole thing of knowing and believing. And he asked the crowd a weird question: is anyone here that's never tasted a mango? Like 3 people raised their hands. And one person goes, well, I never taste one because I'm allergic. So that guy wasn't allowed to come up to the stage. The other two people did, and they picked one guy. And what they did is they picked 10 audience members to go up and whisper in that guy's ear what a mango tasted like. And then the guy ate the mango. He says he says, well, it must be this, this, and this, and he ate it. And then they played back what all the people whispered in his ear, and it was nothing like he said. So how do you know? Like, you experience it. And just like we cannot know what a mango tastes like unless we had the experience, we cannot know God, without having an experience with God. Like, we cannot know God based on the testimony of another person. Testimony gives information about God. Action gives you knowledge of God. But once you know the testimony, once you know God and you hear the testimony, guess what? It makes sense. How about we do the steps and you go to the book studies and you'd be like, okay, and you have a spiritual awakening, you go back to the book study there. When did they put this in the book? You never saw it before. Everything makes 100% sense because you experienced it. There's a great old saying: a dog that does not see the rabbit eventually abandons the chase because they don't see it, they get doubt. So hypothetically, there's this dog chasing a rabbit down the street. It runs by the house where there's another dog. That dog runs by another house, another dog. There's 20 dogs chasing it, right? But only one saw the rabbit, so all the others abandoned it. So we're the same. If we keep chasing God based on the testimony of another person, we abandon the chase because we start to get that doubt comes in. So you gain the experience of, how do you get an experience for riding a bike? By watching others ride bicycles? You had to make conscious contact with the bicycle. You had to get on the bike and ride the bike. We need to make effort to make conscious contact with God. And once you establish that, there's no doubt. Everything makes sense. And one more thing, when knowing confronts a belief, knowing will always triumph because the belief comes from outside of us. Knowing comes from where? Right here. If you ask a group of people where, point to yourself, they don't point up here, they always point here. Very interesting. Being a believer does not cost you anything. There's no sacrifice. Knowing costs something. So before you say, I want to know God, be sure you understand that it costs you something. You must be willing to let something go. And the one thing that you are most reluctant to give up is standing right between you and God. Right between you and God. We're going to look at, where are we at? step 2 really quick because it ties into this really well. Oops, I messed up. There it is. So step 2, came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So when power is this ability to direct the course of events, to make something happen. It also means to possess internal strength. So it comes from a Latin word means portri, which means able. Belief, I mentioned, is to hold something that's, with trust is real. You don't need proof. And power greater than yourself, power is to have, means to have a power greater than yourself, then greater than one possesses, also known as higher power, God, supreme being, whatever you call it. This book's got a lot of names for it. That's what's cool. And restore means to bring us back to original condition. And sanity means soundness of mind, whole. It also means complete. So insanity must mean unsound of mind and not whole. Something's missing. Sanity doesn't get restored by simply choosing to believe that a power can restore you to sanity. If we could, we have a 2-step program, right? Step 2 is coming to believe that a power greater than ourselves. It's about it's more than that. It's about the nature, it's about the first, your insanity, the first drink, but it's also about the nature of your insanity. All these guys say, I believe in God, but I hate my wife, I hate my family, I hate my job. That doesn't sound like a person that's sane. There's a nature of your insanity somewhere. What's the nature? What's your nature? Is it resentment? Is it self-pity? Is it restless, irritable discontent? You cannot overcome this on your own. 429 is the answer. And what's interesting is, step 2 is basically, basically a road sign, that says you're powerless, you need power, come this way. But if you go to page 84, go there really quick, because next week we start We Agnostics. And that's where step 2 starts pretty much in the book. And it says we cease fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. This time sanity has returned. That's that's 40 pages from where we'll be at next week, with lots of directions, inventory, discussing another 6 and 7, amends, all that in between. Just, being restored, being restored to sanity doesn't happen according to this book until page 84 and step 10, somewhere around there, right? So in recovery, I want to close with this, it's very important. A lot of people love to sweep God under the rug, like it's a small part, unimportant. Even though when a person seeks a new life using spiritual principles, the goal is to have a relationship with God. Like I said, know God. So let's, look at it this way. From page 164, from the title page 164, God's mentioned 134 times. But in different words, it's also mentioned. Creator 12 times, Father once, Father Light once, Great Reality once, Higher Power twice, Maker twice, Power greater than himself 4 times, Power greater than myself 6 times, Power greater than ourselves 4 times, Power greater than themselves once, Power greater than yourself once, Power beyond ourselves once, Power 4 times, Spirit 5 times, Spirit of the universe 4 times, Supreme Being twice, D twice, Thy 9 times, and that's not, that's 196 times total. That's not counting words like he, capitalized, him, capitalized, and his capitalized. A dozen times, it's dozens and dozens of times. Yet it means people don't like to talk about God. The nucleus of the program, I said, is God. They say, I've been to meetings say no God talk. Why do people hate God talk at recovery? Because the most controversial word in the subject of man is God. As you heard tonight, we had a whole lot of God talk. And over the course of next month, that's what we're going to have. And to cover step 2 thoroughly, We're going to go slowly and dissect we agnostics and talk about the controversial subject. And it's a great chapter. This chapter for me it was a major game changer. If I had a sponsor that was not thorough enough on specific things in that chapter, I can honestly tell you I wouldn't be here today. Because I needed a new idea of God. I needed my mind to be snapped open a little bit. There's an old saying in recovery, there's a wrench for every nut. This chapter is my wrench. So I'm gonna, do my best to be thorough on that chapter and stay on the spiritual level. Imagine, I'm gonna close with this right here. Imagine you're a diamond miner, and inside the mine, the diamond mine is the most precious mineral known to man, right? If you get it, your life will be different. Everything about your life will change. It'll never be the same. But can you get it from standing outside the diamond mine? No, you got to pick up a pick and go in and start seeking it. And once you find it, you have everything. So we'll begin next week with agnostics, and don't forget to bring an open mind.